Hey guys, thanks for joining us. If you've been following us for a little while, you've seen that we've done a lot of the stuff that would be covered in a basic handgun course and making those into small videos for you guys to watch. Today we're going to talk about loading and clearing a firearm. There's a ton of new first-time gun owners out there today, and this is information that a lot of those people don't have. You might not actually have this information. This is something that you can practice at home. Starting off, we're always going to say, make sure that you don't have any ammo around you when you're practicing or training with your firearm. Well, we even keep the live ammunition in a separate room from the room that we're working in. When we're actually working with loading around and extracting around and clearing the weapon, we're going to be using what's called a dummy round. Some people call them snap caps. You can just use an empty casing if you want to, if you don't have one of those. But you do not want to practice this and work on this with live ammunition. It's just not a good idea. The very first thing that a lot of people have a hard time with is keeping the firearm pointed in the same direction the entire time that they're loading and clearing the firearm. A lot of that has to do with struggling with locking the slide to the rear. A lot of times if you're facing this way, especially when you're on the range, you're facing this way, it's natural to want to do this. When you're not keeping the weapon pointed down range anymore. You want to practice on always keeping it down range. Instead of turning it towards you, you can turn yourself towards it and work on locking it to the rear. So that first step is locking the slide to the rear. So when you're going to load your magazine, locking the slide to the rear, then loading the magazine, and then dropping the slide like a slingshot. That's how you're loading the firearm. And then when you're clearing the firearm, you can drop the source of ammunition, lock the slide to the rear, and then make sure, visually inspect that the chamber is empty, that the mag well is empty, and that there's nothing on the face of the bolt. So let's go through this one step at a time. When you're locking your slide to the rear before loading the magazine, you don't want to, a lot of people tend to grab it overhand this way. It's easier, it might be harder to get started. It might be uncomfortable to start overhand this way, but once you get to practicing it that way and you get used to doing it that way, you have a lot more leverage and a lot more control doing it overhand and on the back this way. So you're gonna pull all the way to the back, you're gonna push up on the lock, let go of the slide first, and then the lock. So sometimes this is the most difficult part to learn. It's just locking the slide to the rear, because with the timing of pushing up on the slide lock and letting go of the slide and just getting that repetition, if you practice that over and over and over, it just becomes second nature, where it just happens naturally when you're trying to lock it to the rear. At first, like I said, it might feel difficult doing it over and over and you'll be fighting with it, but with enough practice, it will become second nature for you. If you're having a hard time pushing that button up when you're trying to lock the slide to the rear, it's okay to turn your firing hand inward so that you can reach it. I even do it on some of the larger firearms. I'll let my hand turn this way, just a slight turn, still having a good solid grip, so that I can push up on that while I'm pulling the slide to the rear. Now that you have your slide locked to the rear, the next step is loading the magazine. When you're loading the magazine, you want to make sure you use the palm of your hand to place it all the way inside the mag well. You don't want to be dainty about it and just kind of press it in there lightly. You want to make sure that your magazine is pressed solid into the firearm. All right, so for here, you have two options on putting that first round into the chamber. The first one being this button that you use to lock the slide to the rear, you can also use to drop it forward. Now, not all firearms are able to do that. Some of them are designed a little more sleek to where that's actually harder to do. And with that one, the second option is really your only option. When you're gonna pull back and release the slide to put that first round in, you don't wanna slowly let the slide forward. You wanna pull back all the way and let it go. You wanna have enough momentum to make that first round seat itself in the chamber. If you're just sliding it forward slowly, it might not actually seat it in battery like it's supposed to be. All right, from here we're gonna talk about clearing. Your first step in clearing this firearm is to strip it of any of its food source. Take the magazine out, and then we're gonna do the steps where we're locking the slide to the rear again. So lock the slide to the rear, and now you're gonna visually inspect that there's nothing in the chamber, there's nothing in the mag well, and that the bolt face is clear. All right, so maintaining a safe direction, point it down range, lock it to the rear, load your ammo, drop it. You're gonna clear it, strip it of the ammunition, lock the slide to the rear, visually inspect the chamber, the magazine well, and the bolt face. All right, so that's really all we have for this one. That's your loading and clearing of a firearm. If you guys have any experience with this and you have any pointers, go ahead, please leave them in the comments below so that people can check them out. Anything that we might have missed out on to make things easier for people here. And as always, if you like what you saw here, hit that like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe and hit that bell notification to be notified when we do put out new content. And as always, run your drills, not your mouth.